All right, so let's have a quick look at Parts Link and see all of this in action. Okay, so I'm just going to log into my Windchill server here. Okay, so I'm in as Pat, the manager. Okay, so we can go in and start to look at how classification works. So in terms of browsing or using what's there, so when I go to my search, if I run an advanced search, you can see here I can run go to my classification explorer. Let's do that instead. Okay, so I can go and browse through my search, my classification tree. Okay, so we're going to have different structures here. If I want to, you can see I've got documents as well as parts, as I mentioned before. Okay, but I'm going to be just looking at parts today. So here are all of my nodes, and here's my graphical representation to help me browse through that. So I can see that there's mechanical parts. I can drill into that. Maybe I'm looking for some rivets. Okay, and then I've got, here's how many rivets I've got in each side. So any of these points, if I get down to the bottom node where there's nothing to show any further, I then start to see basically the list of items that appear inside that particular node. Okay. If I wanted to go back, I could maybe go back up to mechanical parts here. Maybe let's go into screws. I've got a few more things inside there. I've got my different types of screws. But if I just want to look through all screws, I can now just say, show me everything that's screw section here. Okay, so here's all of the items that are classified as screws, but then I can start to refine that further over on the side here through my facets. Okay, so I can maybe say, what's the tapping type? What's the threading? Is it fully threaded or partially threaded? Okay, maybe I'm looking for the thread diameter, so I can start to choose a range of thread diameters that I'm looking for to filter that down even further. Okay, so I can start to use all of my facets in that way to drill down and find what I want. Okay. As I said before, I could maybe go and look for something similar to that. So maybe for this particular item, I might say I want to find something similar. So then I get all of those options. That. Okay, so I could say, well, the diameter of that's 0.25. Maybe I'm looking for something that's plus or minus, let's say 0.5 inches. I could say, well, that's absolute or percent. Okay, so I can choose, I'm looking for thread diameter and start to expand that search out further and get more results back in here as well. Okay, so that's the idea of how I can quickly find and drill in to find those items through Windchill. Okay, once I get into that, if we look at the details page for this, we can see that here's our screw. And what we have is we've got a part classification that tells us how this has been classified. And then we've got all of the attributes that are applied based on that particular node inside the structure. Okay, so that's the idea of how we do that. In terms of how we use Parts Link, if we want to go and create parts, if I go back to my standard components library, you can see, here's the bucket where everything's been dropped into, right? So if I want to classify a part, I'll create a new part just to show what that might look like. So I'll go and create a new part inside Windchill. I've got various subtypes here. I'm going to use the general part type. So I've got all of my normal attributes to get applied to a part. Okay, so those of you who are dealing with this would be familiar with this. I don't have auto numbering turned on in my system, so I'm going to give it a number. I'll give it a name. Okay, I define all of my typical Windchill attributes I have to define. Okay, but then what I have is this part classification. Okay, so at this point here, I can go and choose what node should this belong to. So I could choose to go and search for the node. So here I can go and browse that structure that we're looking at before to get to that particular node. So I might go into my screws and say it's a hex head screw. Okay to that. That will apply it that way. Okay, but there's also, Windchill has the ability to search through that. So I know it's a hex head, so I'm just going to say hex, type in that, and it scans my entire tree to find anything with X in the name. So I can get to it that way really quickly as well. What's happened is once I've actually classified that, I get a second tab appearing here. Okay, so I'm saying this is a hex head screw. So now I've got all of the options for the classification. Okay, so I can start to put in my material. Maybe let's say it's brass screw, what sort of tapping it's using, what sort of threading, what sort of drive type. Okay, I can start to define my lengths. That's apologies for the imperial units here, everybody. And let's say Let's make it 1/2 inch. Okay. And then we've now got that part in there that's now being classified. Okay, so if I go to the details page for that, we can see there's our classification node, and here are all the attributes that I applied based on what was in that. Okay, so now if I go back and start doing my classification browsing as well, search my classification explorer, I go into my hex head screws. Okay, by that right, we should see that in there. Okay, so we've got our parts classified. So that's how we can quickly go in and start to classify any particular items to quickly find, browse, and reuse them. Okay, all right. So that's basically what I wanted to show today in terms of using part classification. So in terms of the idea behind it, right, it's really around improving productivity, okay? Making sure that users, designers can go and find what they need quickly and easily to make sure that they're not going to waste time, by creating additional parts, creating extra stock you need to deal with, dealing with extra inventory and the costs that come with that. Okay. So it's worth pointing out we do have a handout in today's webinar. So for those of you who are attending live, you can if you go to the GoToWebinar panel, there is a handout there that has a few more examples and stories of this. But there are companies that have got millions and millions of parts that they've classified, and they've saved literally millions of dollars per year in terms of reducing their inventory costs by going through this process of classifying things. Okay, to reduce those kinds of overheads.